It's like the best video ever. This is crazy. We got 25 minutes. We gotta go.
Hey!
What's going on, everyone? What's going on?
It is episode 11.
You had to know eventually we were going to be able to not do that, right? Like episode 20.
Yes, this is true. It is true. But until that moment, I have fun doing that. All right, guys, we're super excited to have you guys in our episode 11. Winston and I are back in our separate locations.
That was last week was a lot of fun, man. Drop it in the comment if you guys saw last week. Janelle sitting right here. I'm like sitting like, wait, which way is it? Like, tell me, let us know if you guys enjoyed. Let us know what value you got out of last week's episode.
Yeah.
We love to hear any and every feedback that you guys give us.
Yes. Love the feedback. So what is today's question, you might be wondering? Well, let's see.
Ooh. Let's bring it up right there. There you go. Today's question, people, does race affect the way we market and the marketing materials that we use in our business? Ooh. Now, I do want to put, and the timer is definitely on, and we definitely just want to have a quick, not necessarily a disclaimer, but we recognize that race right now is, and maybe for many people, depending on where you are in the world, you know, something that can be a very hot button topic. And so we do want to just preface this, obviously, with this is just our opinions. We're people of color, if you, right? But we say that because this can be a triggering conversation. And so we don't necessarily want to be insensitive to anyone who the question in itself may set you off or anything. So we do want to be sensitive around that. So we just wanted to start with that. But I'm going to let Janelle lead this one off as our resident professor. And she'll share with you guys. She's done a lot of work around the subject of race. And so.
Very true. So I actually will put this out there. I highly recommend that any and everyone attend the People's Institute workshop called Undoing Racism. I've now attended twice. It's a 2.5-day workshop or seminar. Number one, don't expect to undo racism in the 2.5 days, but it's definitely an entry point. And they have worked with within hospitals within New York City, within the police departments here and in New Orleans. They have worked all over the world, including South Africa to Japan to Canada. They're just doing a lot of good work and talking about this subject, which I think for many people can be really difficult to talk about. So just shout out to them, to everybody at the People's Institute. You know who you are. You're doing good work. And I would like to say my answer to this question really is, I think it does, in the way that people can recognize themselves in what they are being marketed, right? I think for many people, representation is something that's a subtlety. You may not even recognize it. You may not even have the words to describe it, but there's something about seeing yourself either using the product or service that you're marketing that subconsciously, I think, has people actually take action to buy. If they are looking at people and they're like, oh, this isn't for me, they're not going to either buy your product or service. And so I think that is a big part of it. I will say, for example, entertainment, right? This is a really, it may seem like a silly example, but for me, it was a big deal. I love all things sci-fi. I have watched every single Harry Potter, every single Lord of the Ring movie. I've seen them multiple times. I even learned Elvish, right? Like that's, okay, these glasses are real. I am a nerd or a geek, whatever. So
we've heard the ringtone, people. We've heard it.
Yes, you have probably heard the ringtone. So all of those are great, and yet there's nobody that looks like me in really any of those things. I mean, Harry Potter did a little bit better than Lord of the Rings, obviously, but yeah, there's nobody really looks like me. And then I see something like Black Panther, and T'Challa's sister is like me. She's like my complexion. She's intelligent. She's into science. She's even kind of like quirky, and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. Like on film. And it meant something to me to see someone who I could relate to, someone who looked like me, who reminded me of myself in that. Now, if she wasn't marketing anything per se, but I'm telling you, if she would have been like, hey, and like, I love using this particular lotion, I would have been like, well, I need to go buy that lotion because she's just like me. And I would totally do that. Or I want to like use her tax services, you know, like I would totally use her tax services because I could relate to her. She's someone that's like me. And so there's something about that. I don't have the scientific words to back why that may happen subconsciously for people, but there's something about identifying yourself with the people that you're seeing use your product or services that I believe is important. And where we live in the United States, again, I can't speak to other countries, but where we live in the United States, race is something that has been created. And so it is something that I notice when I'm looking at commercials, movies, product placement, like, yeah, marketing, period. What do you think, Winston? I am so curious to hear what you have to say.
Okay. So I want to, it's interesting. The answer is yes. I believe it does affect the way. And it's weird. I want my answer to be no, but so here's where I am, and I love what you shared just now. And I actually didn't realize how, because it's funny, we've talked about race before in our personal conversations, not necessarily around business, and I know we've obviously had conversations around it, around how it affects this actual business. So specific to this business, I'm gonna say yes. And the part of me that wants to say no is the part that for me personally, you know, I'm not from here. I'm originally from Jamaica, and so culturally, you know, even and I gotta say, very recently, I've started to identify with some of the things you talked to me about, where people see themselves based on color. The reason why I say that, again, in Jamaica, we're Jamaicans. Whether you're a dark skin or a light skin Jamaican, you're still a Jamaican. So we think more culture instead of race. I hope I'm using the right terminology. Or I'm sorry, we think more culture than color. Yeah, more culture than color, right? And so the part of me that wants to say no is the part that's still thinking that way. But the part that says yes is the part that has, again, recently recognized that although I may be experiencing things a certain type of way, obviously as somebody marketing to a wide array of people, talking to different people, sharing, you know, what it is that we do. And then for any, you know, service or industry, like Janelle said, that you guys, not industry, but service or product that you're marketing, I didn't understand that people, and even myself, I have different bias around race that I was ignorant around, or ignorant to. And so I know it actually affects marketing. A quick example, I remember sharing a good friend of mine. We were looking at the marketing material that we were using for our company at the time, and I shared it. We were using a video, and so I shared the video with her. And Janelle and I had a laugh about this because it was so funny that I did not notice this. This woman happens to be of Asian descent, right? And we're watching the video, and at one point in the video, there is a young lady that turns towards the camera, and when I've seen the video so many times, right? That it was just one of those things where I'm sitting there with her watching the video, we're sitting there watching the video, and the whole thing went by and I didn't notice it. And then she stopped and noted to me, hey, what exactly was that woman doing when she stopped and stared at the camera like that for so long? And I'm just like, what woman? I've seen the video so many times. And for anyone out there that can relate, obviously you're watching the marketing materials that you use, with prospects and so on. So it's like, the video is so ingrained in your head right now, you probably aren't even paying attention to it at this point, right? You're just so excited, you got to keep your energy, excitement up, all these kind of things. But she pointed it out to me, and I had never really stopped and noticed that this woman stares at the camera for what may have been maybe 4 or 5 seconds, but it seemed like, yeah, exactly what Janelle's doing right now. It seemed like forever. And the reason why I was interested is she picked it up, and this woman happens to be in marketing, worked with some very high level brands, did it for years. And what she was pointing out to me through the marketing material that we were using is certain aspects of the video can be off-putting to people, and subconsciously, and this is the part that really, for us, like really turned things around, was subconsciously you aren't even aware it's happening. But we've all, I think, heard, people buying is more not necessarily emotional. Yeah, exactly. It's not you necessarily intellectually thinking about something. You're going off an emotion. So that's why, for any of us that in this industry, we are taught that we're supposed to keep our excitement levels up. Why? Because if I call you, hey, Janelle, I got this extremely exciting opportunity for you, Janelle's more or less not likely to respond or whatever. But if I call Janelle, listen, you got to give me 5 minutes to show you what I just found. There's something in Janelle, her interest, her excitement, something in her now gets peaked because, man, what's got Winston so excited? I want to also have that experience. But what's going on subconsciously when we're watching or using these materials there, where we may have, what's the term, is it bias? Would that be the bias? Oh, it is. Okay, cool. We have these bias. We are not aware that we're doing it. I'll give you an example, my movie example. At one point when I lived in Harlem, shout outs to Harlem, there was a certain theater. I'm not going to name the theater because the theater itself is fine, but certain groups of people would go to this theater, and it made watching the movie not as pleasurable. So I did not go to that movie theater because a group of people of a certain color would go there and talk through movies. I didn't think this was a real thing. I thought this was a joke. But these people literally would be talking to the movie going, Shaquana, don't go in there. Don't go in the house. And I'm like, I can't believe this is a real thing. And needless to say, if you got into it with them, the night didn't go the way you wanted to. But I didn't realize that I created a bias. And how I caught it, I remember we used to go, Janelle and I and a bunch of our friends would go to movies. And I remember a group of people came in one day, and I had a thought based on them. I didn't know them, but they looked a certain way. And I categorized them. And it was wild because, again, I just don't think I'd ever realized that I had some of these, not bigotry, but some of these, I guess, biases, excuse me, in my own psyche. And so I am almost positive. I've even had people where, in looking at the marketing material I've had, point out that, to Janelle's point, they did not feel represented in what I was sharing with them. And so the opportunity I was presenting probably wouldn't be for them because of that fact. And I, knowing the culture, knowing the people who go to the trainings, knowing the having met the owner of the company, all these different things, knowing the team, a ton of stuff. I've even had it not necessarily around race, but around sexuality, and somebody not thinking that what we were sharing in our opportunity was right for him because he didn't think that homosexuals would be accepted in the company. It was again incredibly, again, me knowing that is not the case and that there were openly gay people in the company and things like that. It just blew my mind that watching a video had this person throw put this in a box simply because they had come from a place where, and rightfully, well, maybe not rightfully so, but their truth was the type of people that I'm around wouldn't like them because of whether it's their color or their sexual preferences. So I am going to answer, yeah.
So bias is a real thing. The reason why you want to say no is because you don't people don't want to think that they have biases, right? Like, because we're kind of taught that like biases are bad, or like that makes you racist, or like whatever. And like nobody wants to be called a racist, right? And so in marketing, this becomes really tough, right? Because who are we marketing to? Who's your audience, right? Like, how are you going to get your biggest, return on your investment? Like all of these become real questions. And so like now you're like trying to figure out like, okay, how do I market my products and services so that way my target audience feels represented and can identify with the people in this marketing material to then take the next step and be like, oh, okay, I'm like them and I want to buy. I mean, or I want to, buy or invest in.
Or use it, yeah.
Yeah, use it, right? I mean, it is. So there's a doctor, and of course I can't think of his name, but I will shout him out and I will say his name shortly. Don't you forget it, or don't you doubt me, but I will find it. But the point is,
don't you bet against her. She is gonna get that name.
That's basically what I'm trying to say. But anyway, he's a cardiologist. He's worked in medical school admissions committees for quite some time, and he's always talking about how to help admissions committees identify biases and things like that, so they can further diversify the students who then get accepted into their programs. So you have doctors of different backgrounds and racial identities. So anyway, he does this really great job of defining what a bias is, and that the bias itself doesn't make you racist. I laugh because really and truly, bias just has to do with our mind's ability to categorize things really, really quickly. The truth is, we are stimulated like a million times a day with different things, right? And so our brain, in order to make a decision about what we are about to do, should I pick up the pencil? Should I put the pencil down? Oh my gosh, should I cross the street now? Should I cross the street a little bit later? Like, in order to make a decision about the God knows how many different decisions we make during a day, you need to quickly categorize things, like quickly. And the way that the brain does that is it just kind of like puts things in different like boxes, right? So that way, like safe, unsafe, go like walk across the street, don't walk across the street. Like all of those things need to be quickly categorized. That way your brain can just make the decision. Otherwise, we would literally be paralyzed and not make any decision at all because there's just too much input, right? And without categorizing. So this is just a natural thing that the brain does in order to live, right? Just to live life. But what happens is if you are constantly presented with a particular way of viewing something, and then you categorize it in a way that you don't even realize, you can take action on in a specific way. So here's an example. If you see a nun, right? And every time you see a nun on TV or in the news or anything like that, it's always like, this is someone who's really giving, who's really caring, who gives of themselves, they're good people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Next time you see a nun, you see the nun and you're like, oh my gosh, this nun needs my help. If you're in the medical community, you're like, I need to take care of this nun. What can I do to help her? Like, she's feeling some heart or some chest pain. Like, maybe let's get an EKG. Let's like take a look. Let's see what's going on, right? And you just think like you're doing everything you can for this nun. Then let's say the alternative, let's say every time you're presented with an image of somebody in a turban, that the image represents them as someone who's a terrorist, right? And so every single time you see somebody with a turban, every image you see, it's associated with a terrorist. Then you see somebody walking down the street who has a turban, and instead of, when the nun walked down the street, maybe you'd smile at the nun. The person with the turban, because you have this perception of them being a terrorist, you're not smiling at them, right? They walk down the street, maybe you're like, oh, okay, trying to look the other way, try to avoid them, right? Then again, an example, if you're in the medical community, medical community, the reaction might be like, oh, this person with the turban has chest pain. Okay, we'll just give them this, and then it should be fine. And that person can literally think that they did a really good job, not realizing that they treated the same exact problem a completely different way just because of their unconscious bias, right? I'll put that into now your business. Again, you see the nun in your business, you're thinking, okay, like this is how I'm going to help the nun. This is how like my products may even help the nun or my service, right? Versus again, you see somebody with a turban and maybe you're like, maybe this isn't for this individual. Maybe I don't want to give them this product. Maybe they shouldn't have this service, right? And now all of a sudden, like again, they may even have the same need, right? The same need, the nun and the person in the turban. And again, you treat them differently because of your unconscious bias. It is not something that you consciously do, it's something that you unconsciously do. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about marketing. Again, marketers know about this unconscious bias.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing that people don't want to admit that they know. But I guarantee you get anybody out here who's like studied marketing, studied people in marketing, they will tell you that they know these things. And they know their target audience, and they know the unconscious biases that their target audience probably has, right? And so then we'll then market towards that. Dr. Capers, I don't know. Does that make sense? Does that like resonate with you? I don't know if.
No. I love when you brought it back to our business, because as you were going through it, I was thinking about a couple different times where, again, just we all get no's in our businesses. Absolutely. The more no's you go for, obviously, is the more success you'll have over time, because you'll learn, you'll grow. But I remember just thinking about some of the times where people did say no, and I just thought that reasoning seemed like such a lame excuse. But as I'm listening to you actually talk this through, and I'm realizing that no, again, for this person in that box that they've created, or the box that we all create, excuse me, the boxes that we all create, they could have actually had a very real, they in fact may have had a very real experience that created that box. And so I was thinking back to a guy that literally looked at me and said, well, Black people don't do this. Don't do that type of business. And in my mind, it just seems so silly. And I disregarded the fact that I could have asked. Now I'm thinking about, like, I could have asked more questions to understand where that thought comes from. Because for me, why I thought it was silly was, I'm a Black person asking you to join the business with me. And so I got angry instead of being open to the idea of, oh, wow, I wonder where you got that from. What can we do? I've also had people where, and we'll talk about this, as obviously there's been a huge influx of Black businesses, or a ton of other businesses that have come about. But we can obviously recognize that with this last 2020, there have been a significant uptick in Black businesses, Black-owned businesses, and people almost like throwing money at you, throwing money at you to start a business and to support Black businesses. And a part of that, I always think is a good thing. But I realize in my mind that it is somewhat limiting to only think that way. And I gotta say, I'm blessed that let me not get into what we do for our own personal business, but I'm happy when I look at that. Some of the things that I think about is where people won't buy from other businesses simply because they aren't Black owned, or and that's specific to just the fact that that's the demographic that I represent. But I thought that was such a silly thing, because in my mind, that's a part of the problem why we haven't been able to to get where we want to, because there is this sense of, I'm only going to support my people. And that thought, although I understand probably comes from a very, very powerful place, as when some very, very powerful place, and a genuine, a good place. But again, the reason why I think it seems limiting is, I don't want to just be around. I don't want to just market a product or service that just serves one people or a group of people. I want whatever I'm representing to be something that is, as a whole, something that many people can take advantage of, many people can get a benefit and a blessing from. Certainly in our business, we recognize that the marketplace isn't made up primarily of only African Americans, right? Or only of whites, or only of Asians, and so on. And so I think, to Janelle's point earlier about how these marketers and I was trying to think of the show I saw on Netflix that talks about some of this stuff, and how they really have this. It wasn't about it was the social media thing. God, was it the algorithm? Yeah. They just talked about how the algorithms that are out there now are so designed to target and almost ensure that you don't see certain things if you're, and they're tracking and keeping certain information so that they can make sure that they are getting and sending you the certain things that they want you to see. That if you live in a certain neighborhood, when they ask you where you live, they want you to know that there's certain deals on certain types of foods in your neighborhood. And for me, some of that stuff is insulting at times, because I'm not a prototypical, maybe African American, or however that is. And so when I see some of that stuff you know, I guess coming at me. It's like me watching the KFC commercial and getting angry that it was almost always a black family. And I know that whenever I saw it, I thought it was. I'm like, is it only black people that eat the chicken?
That is so funny. Well, okay, so that's a really good question. And I think that's why originally to today's question, why you wanted to say no. We want to say no because we want people to understand that our products and services are not just for one race and one people. Here's the thing though, if the people that you're marketing to are of every race, every nationality, every whatever creed, sexual orientation, then you also have to have that represented in your marketing material. So that way each one of them can feel identified with. Okay, here's one that has nothing to do with race. For example, older people, they're their own, like, you know, generation, if you will, right? Like the baby boomers, they're their own generation. They grew up experiencing certain things that makes them kind of like a collective. If they see marketing material that only has people that are like the Y, what is it, the Y generation or the Z or
Gen X and all that. Yeah.
They're like, oh, that's not for me. That's for the younger generation, right? And so, again, it's one of those things about representation. I mean, Brittany talks about it. People want to feel that they're represented, meaning they want to identify with the people who they see using your product and service, so that way they can see themselves using your product and your services. That means your marketing material, if you believe that your product and service is for everybody, that means your marketing is going to have and represent everybody. And so does it matter? Yes. Yeah. Because it's important to know your target audience and and who you're marketing to. And for that reason, if everybody, it fits into that, if all of those people are your target audience, then you're going to want to have material where they can feel like, oh yeah, that looks like me. I understand that person. I've had the same lived experience, that kind of a thing.
Well, then that's actually brings up a very good point then, because then I do want to be clear in this. I do believe I have a target audience, which means that we do exclude some groups, not because of the desire to exclude them based on race, but I do want to be clear that I do agree that I'm depending on what you're marketing. Now, like let's say you represent one of these companies and their service is electricity. They give you a discount on electricity. And I don't know the name of this company, but I do know this is something that's offered in the network marketing space. Obviously, to me, electricity, everybody needs electricity. So to Janelle's point, if I'm using marketing material, I would hope I was just about to go in.
I have a bunch of other stuff that I want to say too, which we're going to have to go into overtime. So you want to talk about the fact that this is open to, like, you're trying to market to everyone. I had a thought about how do you do that in a way that's effective? Like,
yeah. That's exactly where my head was going. I wanted to see the fact that you brought it up. We should definitely talk about the fact that you should be intentional. You should be doing market research. Don't just jump into one of these companies and just think to that point. It is for everyone. There is a target market specific. Maybe if your company, well, nope, let me not do it. Let me not get pulled in.
I will say this. If you join us in overtime, we will also talk about how one group of people is not homogeneous. Asians are not homogeneous. Black people are not homogeneous. What Winston described is really important because not all Black people act a certain way or appeal to a certain type of depiction of Black people, right? So like it's not all the same, and we need to talk about that too. There is definitely a target. We will see you on overtime. Please remember to subscribe, right? Click the like button, click the notification bell. You don't want to miss an episode. If you want to catch what we're saying and you want to talk to us about it, catch us on Patreon. The link for Patreon is, if it's not down below right now, it'll be down below in one of our other videos. You can take a look at that, and let's join the conversation with us on Patreon because this is important.
Yeah, man. And I'm going to be on overtime just because I don't even know what homogeneous means. So I got to find out what that word even means. So I'm, so you know, I'm going to be with it.
Switching, like all that stuff. Like we need to talk about this. Like it's another, okay. All right. We're going into overtime.
As always, remember you deserve
a good
life. Oh, we nailed it. Say that. Have an amazing day, everyone. We'll see you guys next week. And overtime.